Ginger Snaps is a 2001 Canadian horror film directed by John Fawcett. It follows the Fitzgerald sisters, Ginger, played by Catherine Isabelle, and Bridget, played by Emily Perkins. The sisters are teenage outcasts and spend most of their time together creating scenes of violent death to photograph for their school project. On the night of her first period, Ginger is savagely attacked by a werewolf, but her wounds miraculously heal themselves. Knowing that something isn't right, Bridget must attempt to save her sister from her infection progressing to an irreversible point. This short podcast will discuss the concept of the abject in this film and the monstrous feminine, as well as the reason people may derive pleasure from films that make them feel unpleasant emotions such as sadness or terror. In order to understand how the abject is present in this film, the abject must first be described. Julia Kristeva is a French-Bulgarian philosopher, literary critic, psychoanalyst, semiotician, feminist, and novelist. Kristeva wrote an essay on abjection titled Powers of Horror, in which she coined the term the abject, described as our reaction to a threatened breakdown in meaning caused by the loss of the distinction between subject and object, or between self and other. This is a human reaction to something unpleasant, that does not respect borders, positions, rules, which disturbs identity, system, and order. The abject is generally associated with the emotions of disgust or revulsion and focuses on the crossing of socially regulated boundaries. Creed asserts that the horror film is abound in images of abjection, foremost of which is the corpse, whole and mutilated, followed by an array of bodily fluids such as blood, vomit, saliva, tears, and putrefying flesh. Abject imagery is present from the beginning of the film. In Ginger's first appearance, a slow pan shot follows a bloody picket fence with Ginger impaled on it, simulating a death similar to that seen in the 1999 film The Virgin Suicides, directed by Sofia Coppola, in which a young girl jumps from a window to her death, landing on the spiked fence. A montage over the opening credits shows several stills of the sisters reenacting brutal death scenarios, both accidental and intentional. This is the abject in action. Despite knowing that the girls are not actually dead in the photographs, Creed states that the corpse is utterly abject. It signifies one of the most basic forms of pollution, the body without a soul. The immediate scenes of gore are integral to the sisters' characters. The two have a suicide pact, and it is implied in a scene where Ginger holds a knife to her wrist that they partake in self-harm. Their costumes separate them from their peers, who wear form-fitting clothes, makeup, and style their hair. However, the Fitzgeralds wear dark, loose-fitting clothing, shrouding the shapes of their bodies. Their jewellery is made from teeth and bones, and they wear their hair down in an unruly fashion and wear very little, if any, makeup. Both sisters are late bloomers. Neither have had their first period despite being 15 and 16. This immediately depicts the sisters as abject. Everything about them separates them from other girls their age, and they are proud of this. Neither seem to have the desire to fit in. The girls' bedroom is also important. They sleep in the basement separate from the rest of the house in metal frame asylum-type beds. They are abject, therefore they must be placed beyond a border. In her book, The Monstrous Feminine, Film, Feminism, and Psychoanalysis, Barbara Creed states that Kristeva's Powers of Horror provides us with a preliminary hypothesis for an analysis of the representation of women as monstrous in the horror film. The monstrous feminine is a trope found in many horror films, such as Carrie, the 1976 film directed by Brian De Palma, Jennifer's Body, the 2009 film directed by Karen Kusama, and many more. Furthermore, Mark Yankovic, in his book Horror, the Film Reader, states in patriarchal culture, or a culture defined by male domination, women are defined not only as inferior to men, but as other, as different, deviant, and even monstrous. As the narrative progresses, so does Ginger's transformation. It begins with hair growing in places it wasn't before. Then Ginger begins to explore her sexuality, spending more time with boys away from Bridget. In her article, Hair That Wasn't There Before, April Miller describes that the imagery of werewolf films has often been associated with the imagery of adolescence. In Ginger's case, this is true. Her transition from human to werewolf shares many symptoms with female puberty: hair growth, rapid bodily transformations, and uncontrollable physical urges. Before Ginger is attacked, she gets her first period. The girls are on their way to torment their bully when they come across a dead dog. Initially, Ginger believes the blood on her leg must have come from the dog before realizing it's menstrual blood, what she refers to as the curse. Menstruation in itself is abject. This is not only made clear by the fact that blood is waste, but the character's reactions to menstruation. Bridget reacts more strongly to Ginger's menstruation than she does to the decapitated dog they encounter. The contrast between the two reactions show the extent to which the sisters have internalized taboos around menstrual blood as polluting. Even Ginger's mother, Pamela, played by Mimi Rogers, has a disgusted reaction to finding Ginger's blood-stained underwear, holding it at arm's length, squinting and scowling as she examines the dried blood. This reaction to menstrual blood is a reminder of the semiotic order. It is considered unclean, impure, although it is natural. Miller expands on this in her article, stating that though it is not uncommon to see blood on a movie screen, it is extremely rare to see explicit representation of menstrual blood. This bodily fluid destabilizes the symbolic order, the world of communicating and accepting civilized behavior, depicting Ginger as monstrous. The sisters fall into two female stereotypes of the horror genre, of which there are four: victims, prizes, survivors, and monsters. Bridget is the survivor, the final girl. The final girl is thought to be more androgynous, virginal, and desexualized. These traits allow her to survive the monster. These traits in Bridget's character can appeal to a presumed audience of teenage boys. They view Bridget through a sadomasochistic lens, enjoying watching her suffer. Ginger's character, even whilst in the depths of her transformation, is also appealing to this audience. Ginger's transformation from human to monstrous brings about her sexuality. Her clothes become tighter, showing off her figure. She wears makeup, presumably to cover the signs of werewolf beginning to show on her face. However, she begins to embrace her transformation, using her newfound power over men to lure them in and murder them to satiate her appetite for human flesh. Ginger is fetishized through the male gaze. Shots of her body become fragmented, and she becomes abject in her dominant sexuality. All of these factors, her bodily transformation, her menstrual cycle, and her sexuality and sexual desires, illustrate Ginger as the monstrous feminine. There are many reasons people may derive pleasure from viewing horror films. On a scientific level, the suspense, sense of thrill, and fear of the unknown produces adrenaline, which is known to maximize blood glucose levels, more commonly referred to as an adrenaline rush. Horror films explore and break social boundaries, expose audiences to blood and gore, which is censored in modern news outlets. Many people have only seen images of carnage in cinema for that reason. The exploration of the taboo in films is appealing, as you can enjoy macabre scenes without the consequences or fear of social rejection. Ginger Snaps specifically appeals to an interpolated audience of adolescent boys and girls. A female subject watching the film may associate with the sisters, especially if they themselves are outcasts, but the main appeal is to a male viewing subject. In her book, Recreational Terror: Women and the Pleasures of Horror Film Viewing, Isabel Pinedo compares pleasures in horror film viewing with those in pornography. This is known as carnography. If pornography is the genre of the wet dream, then horror is the genre of the wet death. Ginger's body is so fragmented by the male gaze that all the way through her werewolf transformation she is sexualized, appealing to a young male viewing subject. Even when she is completely transformed, the only scrap of Ginger left is her bare breasts. This film, like many others in the horror genre, takes pleasure in the act of showing Ginger's distorted body. Although Ginger has power over men through her sexuality, she must be punished for this. Mark Yankovic claims that both the woman and the monster prove deeply threatening to male power and must be violently punished. In the end, Ginger is chastised, and tragically so, stabbed to death by her own sister. Her difference from the masculine norm is not only defined as monstrous, but is also punished.